The movie begins with a flash to the future, as Marshall is chased down a long corridor. He's hurt and isn't able to run for much longer, so he finds somewhere to hide. Days before the gruesome scene takes place, Vivien and Dawn are sitting on the table in their space shuttle, talking about their return to Earth. Marshall walks in as the conversation was about to turn to him. He tells them that the cargo they are carrying is safe and secure. Vivien asks him what they were transporting, but Marshall tells her that he doesn't know. The movie flashes back to their recruitment process for this mission. They were required to state their names, their regions, and why they would be a good fit. Back in the shuttle, Marshall and Dawn walk into the other room. Marshall is agitated by Vivien and asks if they need to do something about her. Dawn is adamant that Vivien will respect their decision. Still upset, Marshall warns her to watch the other woman. As he walks to the door, Dawn sees an elderly man standing behind her and screams. Marshall is startled and asks her what was wrong, but it was only a hallucination that Dawn couldn't explain. Vivien comes in, running into the room, and sees Dawn on the floor crying, her hands bleeding from the cut she got when she knocked off a frame. Vivien and Marshall kept asking what was wrong, and Dawn told them she has seen someone. Marshall tries to help her up, but she runs out of the room upset. In a different scene, Vivien, Dawn, and Marshall are having a conversation about the mission. They are all excited about what's to come. Marshall tells them that the opportunity they were given is very rare. Dawn is doubtful of how they will react when they finally reach Earth, as they've been living on Mars for 30 years. The next day, they are all gathered together to eat breakfast. Marshall wants to know what happened with Dawn when she had her breakdown, but Dawn is reluctant to say anything. In the control room, the three of them are having a conversation. Vivien tells her that she was the first one in her family to get accepted into the program and that her mother was very proud of her. She tells them that she wishes she could take them with her. Dawn soothes her by saying she could come back and visit, but Marshall tells them that's only a theory, that no one ever does. Marshall tells them that he has a wife and a kid on the way back on Mars. Dawn is surprised to hear that he's leaving them. He reminds her of the rule that no one under 30 can leave. Vivien asks Dawn if she has any family, but Dawn says she doesn't and leaves to take a shower. Later, in her room, Vivien is unable to sleep because of leg cramps. She lips her way to Dawn's room, but finds that it's empty. Next, she goes to see Marshall, but she can't find him in his room either. She walks along the hallway, yelling their name, agitated to the point of hysteria. Then all of a sudden, she feels her body being restrained. She yells out, unable to see Dawn and Marshall, holding her down and calling out to her to calm down. Marshall injects her with medication that will sedate her, and it finally calms her down. The movie flashes back to their recruitment process when Vivien is being questioned whether she can handle a stressful situation and if there's any mental illness she hasn't made them aware of. She answers no. In the shuttle, Dawn and Marshall are playing a board game. Vivien asks Dawn whether she has heard the rumors about Section 8, that a person was used as a test subject on purpose by being subjected to radiation, which caused his death. Marshall tells them that it's just a rumor and that it's probably not true. Later, in his cabin, Marshall is working out alone, while Vivien and Dawn are in the lounging area. Vivien shows her a book that contained pictures of rainforests. Vivien feels like Earth is just too good to be true. Marshall is dreaming about the time he spent with his wife, when suddenly he feels a hand on his arm and he wakes up. When he looked at the person in front of him, he realizes it was Tanya, his wife. He's startled but feels like he is hallucinating. Tanya asks him why he left her when she needed him and shows him her bloody clothes where she lost her child. Shocked, he tries to grab her but instead falls on the floor. He looks at his hands and they are covered in blood. He goes to the bathroom to wash them off when suddenly the doors explode and he is about to be sucked out into the open air. Screaming, he wakes up on his bedroom floor. Marshall is traumatized by what he just experienced. Dawn is walking around the ship, finishing her rounds when suddenly the lights go out. She calls Marshall but doesn't get a response. She feels like there's someone there with her. Suddenly, she feels a hand on her shoulders and turns around startled. Standing behind her was her departed father. He tells her that everything was okay and that she wasn't going crazy. He tells her that she was destined for great things and vanishes. Late, in their small botanical room, Vivien, Dawn, and Marshall are gathered together to watch an introduction video. The man in the video informs them that for the first year of arriving on Earth, they will not be allowed to make phone calls to their loved ones back on Mars and can only send letters. Marshall and Vivien are upset by this information. In the control room, Vivien and Marshall are waiting for Dawn to come back from finishing her rounds. Once she does, they discuss what has been happening to them ever since they got on the ship. They all acknowledge that they're seeing things. In their little botanic room, all three of them are sitting around and talking. Vivien is reading a book about Earth, and Marshall keeps asking her why she's still reading it. She tells them that she likes it. All of a sudden, they start to experience some type of turbulence. They run out to assess the damage. Dawn checks the control room and informs them that nothing is wrong. Vivien is checking the cargo when Marshall calls her to help him. It seems everything is okay for now. After the incident, Vivien is brushing her teeth and walking in the hallway when she hears sounds coming from behind her. She turns around and sees a giant spider coming after her. Frightened, she starts running and hides herself in the control room. Her partners hear her screams and come to help, finding her locked in the control room. Marshall is sitting alone watching testimonial videos of people living on Earth. Vivien comes over and tells him that they're getting ready to have dinner in their dining room. Marshall and Doan are asking Vivien what happened. She tells them that she doesn't know what happened and that a giant spider was chasing her. Marshall tells her that she needs to control herself or she will jeopardize their mission. Vivien and Marshall have an altercation because of this when Doan interjects and tells them that she also has been seeing things. During their discussion, Marshall starts hearing alarm bells going off in the shuttle, but neither Doan nor Vivien can hear it. Marshall freaks out and leaves the room. Doan, in a sudden realization, tells Vivien that there must be something in the cargo hold. Vivien and Doan follow Marshall to the hallway, where he is trying to fix a leak that did not exist. They try to tell him that there was nothing there, but he wouldn't listen. Vivien goes to stop him, but she's plagued with her own hallucination when she sees an alligator bite her. Marshall is now paranoid and is starting to feel like his partners are trying to hurt him. His paranoia is further confirmed to him as he hallucinates that the testimonials he was watching told him to be careful. They continue their destination and they seem to be much closer to Earth now. Vivien is in the cargo hold and sees a bunch of cargo boxes had fallen to the ground. She calls Marshall and Doan down to see what happened. Marshall is upset and blames Vivien for not being thorough in her last check. Vivien suggests that they should report back to Mars and tell them what happened, but Marshall disagrees. He is afraid that they might be called back to their home base. Doan agrees with Marshall and tells Vivien that those rocks in the cargo boxes might have contaminated them. They all agree not to say anything. Marshall wants to talk to Doan alone. The movie flashes back to a previous scene as Marshall warns Doan whether they can trust Vivien or not, but Doan assures him that they can. The movie flashes back to when Marshall and Vivien were hallucinating. As Doan watches, she realizes that the rocks in the cargo hold are what causing all of this. She yells at Marshall that she thinks the rocks might have some kind of radiation and that nothing that they were seeing was real. While trying to get them to snap out of their hallucinations, Doan sees her father in the far corner. He tells her to come to be with them, but Doan knows it's not real, so she snaps out of it and goes to help her friends. Marshall slips and hits his head on a pipe, slicing his forehead open. When he manages to get himself up, he is convinced that the two women with him are trying to kill him. He hallucinates that Vivien is about to beat him to death with a crowbar. Vivien and Doan watch as Marshall reacts to his hallucinations. They yell, telling him that it's not real, but he can't hear them. Marshall runs through the corridor, head bloody and still hearing their voices taunting him. He manages to get down into the cargo hold and lies on the floor, exhausted. Laying there, he sees his wife and daughter next to him, but their faces seem blurry. Next to the delirious Marshall, Vivien and Doan are trying to check whether he was okay. Dazed and confused, Marshall attacks them, thinking that they took his family away from him. While they were in the middle of their altercation, the ship enters the Earth's stratosphere, and the speed on which the ship is moving forced them to the ground and pins them. After a few minutes of jostling movement, the ship's computer announces that they have landed on Earth. Vivien gets up and embraces Doan. They pick Marshall up from the floor and embrace him too. Vivien thinks that the world out there is going to be wonderful. Doan walks away, leaving the two alone. She hides and keeps one of the stones that case hallucinations in her pocket. Together, they open the door to the shuttle and see Earth for the first time. They are shocked at the beauty before then. The movie ends as Marshall, Vivien, and Doan hold each other's hands and walk out into the light of the sun. And with that, the movie ends. We hope you enjoyed our video. Watch the next recaps on the screen, and don't forget to subscribe for more amazing recaps. See you in the next one.